Hi, and welcome to Voices from the Left. I'm your host, Craig Call. A quote to start us off: "Men never do evil so completely and cheerfully as when they do it from religious conviction." Blaise Pascal. You can see the citation for that in the show notes. All right. So today I'll be speaking with Emily Russell. She has recently deconstructed from evangelicalism and uses her music to help others understand what she went through. Hi, Emily, and thanks for joining me.
Hi, Craig. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. So let's talk a little bit about the phrase deconstructing faith. So in general, my understanding is that it's a process one goes through that includes critical thinking about their religious belief structure, often Christianity, and how they use that belief structure to live their life. A person may experience a range of outcomes from this process that can include rejecting the more extreme, discriminatory teachings of their church and may even end up with the person no longer identifying as Christian. Do you think that's a fair understanding of what it is? Knowing it's probably more complex than that, but
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. There is that spiritual component, and then also for me, there was a political component. And for me, it was one big snowball with lots of little elements that just kind of kept rolling into one big snowball. So, but yeah, absolutely.
all right. Would you, Emily, provide us a little background about yourself and how you got into being a musician?
Oh yeah. So when I was 10 years old, I was picked out for a solo in music class, and I sang a few bars, I guess, and like all the kids kind of stopped and looked at me, and it was like, oh wait, what? And then I was picked for a few solos for like programs, and I guess that was like the time that I recognized, like, oh, I must have something here that seems to be moving people. And fast forward to when I was 14, my dad taught me how to play guitar.
Excellent.
So yeah, it was pretty cool. I will always remember that season of my life. I just couldn't wait for my dad to get home. And we would like play guitar and I would sing along with him. And then it was like, oh, I can't wait for him to get here anymore. I want to do this. So he'd teach me, the G chord and a C chord and a D chord. And eventually you learn enough chords that you can start playing, a myriad of, especially of country songs, which is what I would have been learning at the time with my dad. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's kind of how the ball got rolling. And in college, I partnered with a couple of other Kansas City musicians and started a band. And yeah, that kind of was the first taste of, doing the music thing.
Sure. Excellent. So what made you decide to deconstruct? I suspect it was not just one incident, but a collection of them, which you kind of already alluded to.
Yeah, and it's also funny because I do see people use that word like decision a lot, and it's sometimes people seem to kind of misunderstand that there was like a choice that was made. And in fact, it's really more like something that happens to you as you start to step back and really analyze, for me, analyze everything that I thought I was really sure about,
Sure.
and start, like you mentioned, like really critically thinking about different things. So a couple of those trigger things for me, I guess, that kind of started the ball rolling was having a couple of colleagues who were in the LGBTQ community, who were also very like outspoken Christians. And the church that I was a part of was a Southern Baptist church, and so Christianity and being gay did not line up. So I'm trying to think, I'm like, how are these people who were just absolutely incredible people, how do they justify being gay and being Christian, and so I started to try and unpack that, and so there was kind of that piece. And I want to say I want to say around 2015, maybe the same time frame as well. Immigration was once again a hot button issue. And I used to have this very simplistic view of like, well, yeah, I'm not opposed to immigration, but I think people should do it legally. And like that's a phrase that you can say and just like, I used to just be able to be happy with that,
Right.
and then it's like, hold on. And I saw a documentary on, I think it was on Netflix called The Other Side of Immigration. And it totally blew me back. And I recognized that this issue was so much more complex than these little like blips of energy of focus that I, was barely giving it and placing votes off of.
Sure.
And yeah. And so when you learn about immigration taking up to 10 years for people to quote unquote do it the right way, I mean, you have a family who's in immediate danger or who is on the fringe of starving, like you're going to do whatever it takes. And I would argue that any one of us, any parent would do whatever it took to make sure their families were safe and make sure that our kids were fed, even if it meant, breaking a law or two. I mean, I just yeah, so that was kind of like the process of this whole ball rolling for me. And so it was political at first, and then came Trump's election, and it was so crazy when I look back at it, and I do feel bad because I did vote for Trump, and I in 2016, I it was like I was being starting to be pulled apart, but I wasn't quite ready to break ties with this conservative like identifier that I had, I don't know if that makes any sense. And I mean, gosh, when Trump made those comments in the bus, I mean, and I was a victim advocate. And so I'm representing people who have had all kinds of, sexual assaults um perpetrated against them. And I mean, I remember being like, gosh, I just wanted to say, I hate both of these choices. I hate all of these choices, but I'm going to pick the lesser of two evils. And to me, in the conservative evangelical world that I was in, Hillary was like that. She wasn't even an option ever. Like I remember people always referring to her as Killary. I guess maybe conspiracy theories for killing. I don't know. That would be a fun angle to unpack further. But
Probably the Benghazi thing would be my guess, but I wouldn't know either without really looking into it.
yeah, yeah. So it was like I was still just under that veil enough that I wasn't quite ready to like vote Democrat, which would have just been like, whoa, out there. But I will say that the the night I woke up in the middle of the night and turned on the news real quick to see who won the election, and Trump won, and I was like, holy shit, he did it. I don't think I really believed that he was going to win, and then he did. And then there was this massive pushback and people lining the streets and protests, and that had never happened in my lifetime. I had never seen people in the masses reacting like that to a president being elected. And so instead of just doubling down on my stances, which I feel like a lot of people do these days, I got curious and I was like, why? And I really started to unpack, why people think Trump is racist and why, again, looking at these issues which to me, I guess the heart of which are people issues, LGBTQ rights and immigration. These are people who are, trying to exist, trying to have safe, healthy, quote unquote, normal lives. And I just pretty quickly started recognizing that my vote for red was causing harm to minority groups. And so that was like one angle of things. I hope it's okay that this is a long story.
Yeah, no, this is great. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's certainly a can of worms. Um, so that was like the first like angle of things. It was political. Over in my personal life, in my career life, I should say, I was a victim advocate, and I had a couple of cases that I had been working on for some time. And uh, I really felt like in one of them in particular, I felt like there was no question about it. God was in this case. Like I had been brought to this family because I was bringing the power of God with me, and we were going to make sure these kids were never exposed to their abuser again. And then even after there were 7 different professionals that spoke up that day that all attested to abuse by a particular parent. Like there was no question. There was no question. And then for some reason, the judge was like, this is clearly a case of kids that are crying out to get their parents' attention, and their parents can't get along after a divorce. And I mean, I guess I should kind of say trigger warning. I won't go into it, but I will say, I mean, I saw bruises with my own eyes. That's not a cry for
Dang.
help, just like that. These kids went back into an abusive home, and I I was so shook by it. Um, Again, because and I think it was different because we had lost some cases here and there, but I guess by and large in my advocacy career, we had also won a lot. I had a lot of people that I worked alongside who did get to see justice. So maybe I was spoiled in that way, but uh, watching that happen to children who have absolutely no control over their situation really caused me to analyze where was God in that moment? Where was he? And it just became like this increasing pressure because I sang just about every week, every other week on our church's worship team. And I would have to sing words that were like, God, you were always faithful, you are good. Songs about putting all your faith in God and trusting God. And like, I'm sitting here with this, now I can look at it and see this growing cognitive dissonance of like singing these words, but my real life experience was showing me something very different. Because if God is all knowing and all powerful, and very capable of creating miracles, answering prayers, but he chose not to intervene in those kids' lives. Like it's almost like I cannot forgive it. And I came to this place where it's like, it's either God's not there or God is there and didn't do anything, and I don't want to worship that guy anymore, you know? And it kind of, there was like a cherry on the top of everything for moment for me when another case that I had been working on for 4 years, the abuser nearly killed this child, and we thought finally we had enough evidence to put this guy behind bars. And man, if I could just tell you the amount of people on the abuser's side praying in a giant circle in the courtroom during lunch, like, oh my gosh. And I mean, I guess you could say God answered that prayer because we got a not guilty verdict. Um, and now that case has more of a happy ending, just because of the way things worked out. We were able to get enough private donations for the safe family to get full custody of that child.
Oh, that's good.
He doesn't, live in the same state anymore. He's thriving. But, again, here was this opportunity for God to intervene and protect this child, and silence,
Yeah,
so there was this
man.
spiritual, yeah, it was really heavy, and there was this, spiritual angle for me here now. And I started recognizing in 2019 that like my mental health was suffering from it. I had pulled back from one church. I went to another church kind of thinking like I can't be the person that shows up with the game face every Sunday trying to work through this shit. Like I can't do that anymore. So
Right.
I kind of felt like I wanted to just escape to another church where I could just sit and heal, like not have a responsibility in the church, just kind of be and listen, for the glimmers of hope. And, you want there to be purpose and meaning in that. And then 2020 rolls around.
Yeah.
uh COVID, right?
Yep.
And there was this minute where for maybe about a month, uh, people seemed to be kind of, cooperating and collaborating to keep one another safe. And then it's like people got tired of that. Um,
Yep.
and as I sat back, and our window to the world was social media, right? At that point. Um, and I watched people start to kind of create conspiracy theories around it. And uh, I know in my community, I don't know about yours, there was a movie or a little 25-minute YouTube video that came out called Plandemic. And
Okay.
it was about essentially about how this vaccine was planned all along for nefarious purposes or to make somebody rich. I mean, something along those lines. I shut it off after the first 5 minutes and saw two immediate like untruths. She claimed that her house was searched without a warrant, and she claimed that she was arrested without giving her Miranda rights. And I mean, as somebody who worked, I specifically worked in advocacy alongside law enforcement in a couple different capacities. And so watching, watching that, I mean, right away, I knew like you can't do that. You blow a case, like intelligent law enforcement officers, prosecutors, judges, they would never allow these types of things to happen because you won't even be able to, let your case go through. It'll get thrown out and dismissed, whether somebody's guilty or not. Um, and it was like, okay, so right away I saw, BS in it. But the number of people that I know who are smart, just intelligent people who started sharing this and causing this doubt. And it was just like this thing that, it just pushed the dominoes. It just pushed the dominoes and they all started falling. And people very quickly chose sides and masks became political. And the people that were the most outspoken against all of these things also happened to be the most like vocal Christians. And I felt like it was just this whole season of shock. Like I thought that I knew the church community so well. I thought we were about, taking care of our neighbors.
Right.
And here we are in a pandemic and we're just going to choose to not believe that this is a thing or that it doesn't impact people that bad, or why should I have to change mine? And I know like major inconveniences. I don't want to minimize it because also businesses were incredibly affected, right? Which is
Yeah.
people's livelihoods. I mean, I don't want to minimize what was happening. But I guess maybe I had a little bit of a unique perspective because my best friend's mom passed away from COVID pretty
Sorry to
quickly.
hear that.
Yeah. And watching her having to grieve through that season was it was heart-wrenching. I mean, even like when I went to finally like go and see her, we like kept our distance, there was 20 something feet in between because we didn't know if we could touch, we didn't know if we could give a hug,
Right.
at that point still, because it
Yeah.
was pretty early. I think it was very late. I think it was actually in April. So, I
Yeah.
think
Real
everything kind of,
early. Yeah.
yeah, it was pretty early. So we didn't have all the information yet. And I do feel like the medical community and the scientific community, everybody was making the best choices they had based on the information they had at the time. And it was for the greater good of keeping people alive and keeping people healthy. And I mean, and here's my friend grieving through this, and there's a truck driving through my town that's literally like a box truck painted, "COVID is fake, you fell for the lie."
Oh
You
my
know,
gosh.
yeah, I mean, shit
That's
like that.
crazy.
Yeah. And
It's
and it didn't matter because then people like in our her mom lived in a different community in Michigan, and so it wasn't something that directly affected people yet, and it took a while for COVID to really start having a major impact here in rural Missouri. And like everybody was tired by then, there was
yep.
what do we call it, COVID fatigue,
Yeah.
and we all felt it. um, but people started dying, and people were so opposed to the vaccine and its intentions, and we just watched people get really ill, and because I don't know, because they chose to believe the I don't know, or doubt the legitimacy of the information. Anyway, so I don't want to make it all about COVID, but it just was this period of time where I just felt like I was in such shock looking at what I thought people would do, what I thought people should do as followers of Christ, as people who profess to love their neighbors.
Right.
And that it's like Christianity just failed in the face of everything. Throw on top of that the Black Lives Matter movement after George Floyd's murder. You know, they're just, again, more people-based issues. And instead of going, I don't understand what that's about, I'm going to try and find that out, people just minimized it and mocked it, rolled their eyes at it, and I was just like, wow, humanity has gone to shit. you know and and so this was just, you can hopefully feel that the snowball's picking up.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just growing and growing, and God, millions of people are dying, and then there's a tornado in I think it was Kentucky, or maybe even very southern Missouri. And but the Bible, like, the tornado killed like over 100 people in this in its path, but there was this Bible in a church that survived, and people were just praising that. And I'm just like, well, what about all those people that died?
Right, exactly.
Again, God, where the hell are you? And I can't say that I've like landed in a place, like I don't feel certain about anything. But it almost makes more sense to me that there's not a God up there playing, with us like little ants in a ant farm. So I don't know. So that's kind of how my deconstruction began. And there came a point eventually, I think it was in 2021, we were able to use COVID as an excuse for so long to not go back to church. And, then we
Sure.
were vaccinated, and, you felt like it was probably okay to get back out in mass crowds again. Um, and I didn't want to go back. And I remember saying to my husband, I don't think that I ever want to go back to church. And he was like, yeah, I mean, I understand that there's so much, craziness right now. Because at the heart of all the conspiracy theories, it seemed to be stemming from, again, these, church groups um, and the people who, again, are like the most vocal Christians in my world. It was just really hard to connect I guess the dots didn't connect for me. And I just was like, you know what, this is kind of embarrassing and I don't want to be associated with this group of people anymore.
Sure.
And luckily, my husband was really understanding about that. So yeah, that is the nutshell, believe it or not.
I can appreciate, especially from COVID, how that kind of helped, finish the unraveling, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it. The COVID thing in particular, when you were talking about the pandemic and like the conspiracy theories and stuff like that, what never made sense to me about those things is that the amount of people worldwide that would have to have been in on that for it to be true is astronomical, right? It would
Yeah.
have to have been the entire federal government in every country, or every country that we normally see, right? Europe,
Yep.
North America, Southeast Asia, Russia, most of South America, right? They all
Yeah.
would have had to have been in on it. Just the federal governments, not to mention the state governments, all the local governments would have had to have been in on it together. It's how vast that would have needed to be is so, like I said, it's astronomical.
Yes.
It's not even, it couldn't possibly be true, right?
Yeah, that was my thoughts exactly.
Yeah.
And you can, like, I even feel that way about like the I want to phrase this correctly, like the Trump's attempt to I mean, I feel like I hate using rhetoric now because I feel like I heard so much of that, but for lack of better words, Trump's attempt to steal the election. I mean, I believe there were between 50 and 60 different times that evidence was presented in a preliminary hearing that never made it past a preliminary hearing because you have to have enough evidence to justify
Right.
costing a county a trial,
Right.
um and same thoughts. How many people would have to be in on that? And you're telling me that out of, you know, 50, 60 different cases, hearings, none of those people were Trump supporters? Like they're all
Right.
Trump haters and
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
their power? Like that that is not logical. When you look at the big picture, is that the thing that makes the most sense?
Right. Yeah. I hear you. Yeah.
I mean,
It was
when
mind
we
boggling. It really was.
yeah, when we met just to get introduced to one another last week, I know I said like I'm all for a good conspiracy theory. I'm here for it about aliens and Bigfoot. Like I love
Sure.
the idea of the mysteries of the world,
Sure.
But I just like if we have facts,
Yeah.
if we have facts and evidence, it's super hard to look past and make
Right.
like
Well, especially when it's mountains of facts, right?
right.
And not just one guy in the corner. It's an entire room full of people, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look how that's affected everything. People, even people who feel like they're more in the middle, they don't know what to believe because so much bullshit has been thrown in and actual facts have been questioned and picked apart in wild ways, and it's just really put us in a weird spot as a country.
And this kind of rolls into my next question too, but I was more specifically curious about like resources, whether you were looking online about it or if you found, if you happen to talk to a psychologist or a psychiatrist about it, or a philosopher or a teacher, anybody really, I guess.
So there was it was kind of a lonely journey. It was not kind of, it was a lonely journey because I didn't feel totally safe having these thoughts out loud, especially any thoughts against God or God not being in there, or maybe God's an asshole. Like I didn't feel safe communicating that with my friends, because if you look at, I had been a Christian since I was 26, and so at this point I think I was like 12, 12ish years in, and just like really, like, that was the community that I had built around myself. So that was also my support system. And I just didn't feel comfortable taking these thoughts to people, outside of outside of a couple of really close friends. And so there was kind of that component. So on Instagram one day, I was just looking through, and a profile called The Naked Pastor. Have you ever heard of him?
Uh, I think I might have ran into him briefly like earlier this week when I was doing a little bit of
I bet.
searching for some stuff, but not a whole lot. I'm not totally familiar now.
Yeah. So he was the first, like one of his posts rolled up, and it was the first time that I saw the word deconstruction. And then I saw comments, and like he's an artist, and he draws cartoons that kind of try and point out the hypocrisy of the way we behave and what Jesus, called us to do. And 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 there were hundreds of comments of people like, yeah, me too. Oh my gosh, this is my story. Just, and it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not alone in this. Like there's lots of us out there that are thinking about these things, and just questioning, right? That's kind of what I had just called it, is like, I'm just questioning everything.
Yeah.
And so there was an immediate comfort knowing that there was this whole online community of people who were deconstructing. And so in the spirit of continuing down that path, I started, following lots of content creators who were discussing their journeys, and intentionally following people with very different perspectives than myself. You know, Trying to understand life from every angle possible. And I also did read a few, I've read a few books, listened to a few audiobooks. I mentioned God and the Great Gay Christian before, by Matthew Vines. That was incredibly helpful. I think in my brain, early on, I needed to say, well, this is okay with God in some way, right? Before that, I could be okay with it. But when you break it down, there is so many things that were influenced, so many ways that we learn about the Bible now that were influenced by the culture, ironically, because they really preach against, being a part of the world and part of the culture. But it was culture that influenced our interpretations of the Bible today. And kind of recognizing that and going, well, hang on. The word homosexuality didn't even show up in the Bible till 1946, I believe. Like, if that's just been added in, what else has changed, And there's actually there's a documentary that it's been released in limited ways, but they're looking for a major release. It's called 1946, and it's about how that happened, and how the people recognized pretty quickly that they had misused the word, misinterpreted the word. And I believe in that case, it was being very specific with pedophilia, which was obviously different than homosexuality.
Right.
And so, but it was like, by the time that this board who approved it recognized the harm that it was going to cause, like, it was too late. It had already been printed in hundreds of Bibles. And So, and the rest is history. I mean,
Right.
um, there was just a black man in the gay community killed this weekend, and uh, you won't convince me otherwise that like the blood is on the church's hands because of the rhetoric that has been spouted and the hate that rhetoric has caused. Um, that that is something that's got to change. So anyhow, God and the gay Christian was huge for me to unpack and understand that.
Hmm.
Now I don't feel like I need that biblical support. I just feel like humans should just get to exist and be the deciders for themselves how they want to do that. Who is
Sure. Yeah, for
why is it
sure.
my place or the government's place to decide that?
Right.
Um, let's see, The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby was really great too. And that talked about the church essentially accepting and justifying slavery and
Hmm.
kind of understanding that. And it's like, whoa, you can use this book to support whatever you want
Right.
if you pick out just the right words. So that was great. Let's see, Recapture the Rapture was a really interesting book. I read I Am Restored by Lecrae. I read Jesus and John Wayne. So there was some book reading, but also just following normal people who are talking about their experiences of racism, of going through the immigration process, and being somebody in the LGBTQ community, and just sitting back and listening and learning and not trying to project my own thoughts and opinions into their actual experiences. So
Hmm. That's
as far as
excellent.
as far as resources go, I just really found that there was a community of people out there, and um that I could belong to, but also like we kind of had each other's backs in a way. Like we all knew that because this was like I'm not even, like I said, I started going to church when I was 26. And can you imagine that was such a whiplash for me. It was an identity crisis because everything that I
Sure.
was so sure that I knew about myself just kind of crumbled.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine what people are going through who were raised, deeply into those beliefs. And
Sure.
as a child, this is what you're told. And the trauma now that we're learning about from saying, well, you better, accept God into your heart or else you're going to go to hell. I mean,
Right.
when who's not going to jump on board with that when you're 5 years old, 10
Yeah,
years old,
right. Yeah, you have
15 years old?
a captive audience at that age, right? And a
Uh,
very, moldable audience at that age.
Especially when your parents are saying these things,
Right.
the people that you
Exactly.
love and trust.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually, this will be probably unpopular, but I feel like it's unethical to expose kids to religion before their brains are fully formed, which is in the our mid 20s. The most
Right.
research shows that
Yeah.
because they're not really getting to consent on a choice that is
Yep.
so deep in a person's heart and mind.
Yeah. I
Um,
For sure. I mean, I don't think that's controversial. I think that's the way to do it. Like, don't teach, if they ask, answer a question, right? But don't steer them one way or another. I mean, if they happen to pick up on it because you are one way or another, just roundabout way, sure. But let them make a decision when they're, emotionally and ready and mature enough for it, right?
yeah, yeah. Well, you may not think that's controversial, but we haven't released this podcast yet. So there
That's
will
right.
be some of my some of the people that used to follow me are probably going to be very unhappy about that. But
Wow.
I don't know. I feel like it's a very fair statement, and there's
Yeah.
research about brain development now, and we know so much more about yeah, like you said, the emotional capacity. We are not complete brains until our mid-20s, and we're exposing this, heaven or hell concept to kids. And I don't know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't think it's cool, I guess.
Yeah. You won't get an argument from me. um, so yeah, I guess that leads into the next question pretty good. So did you, maybe this didn't happen, but I imagine at some point people who were other members of your I guess your first former congregation, if that makes sense, they probably realized what was happening at some point, especially when you stopped showing up, right? Like, did you get any opposition from anyone, friends, family, members of the church community? Was it so, and if there was, did it go so far as you know, like trying to intervene with your process?
I kind of just quietly backed away. Um, and then, COVID created that opportunity to kind of isolate from everyone.
Gotcha.
And so I feel like it was a process that probably happened without people really knowing what was going on.
Okay.
And so what I actually started getting more was people asking my mother-in-law, when is Emily coming back to church? We sure miss singing, or I'd be out in public at Walmart, the mecca of my small town,
Right.
and run into people, and we sure miss you, just like little subtleties like that. And I just didn't even know what to say. But I did feel like it was happening enough, especially because my mother-in-law was attending church, and people, kept saying, "Hey, when's Emily coming back?" And I kind of just wanted them to leave her alone,
Sure.
And so there was a day that I just decided to post a song that I wrote and explain that I wasn't really sure. I think actually, I'm not even sure that I publicly said anything about not believing in God or questioning God. In fact, I think I might have said, like, me and God are good, but the way that people have behaved in Christian circles, I don't want any part of that. And I'm probably not coming back to church. It's not something I want to be a part of. So that kind of started it. And then of course, I did that and posted a song, right? Like, "Oh, here, you've been waiting to hear me sing. Here it is."
Sure.
you know? So, yeah, so I kind of feel like that was just kind of the way. And then, and I just, bits and pieces of me have gotten more brave to, recognize that I'm a person who gets to have opinions on things as well. And I did, I did go to therapy, for a time. I will say that, because I ran into the parent of one of those cases that I really struggled with, because it just crushed me. And so I went into therapy, and as therapy does, you address this issue, but then you're like, oh, but there's also all these things over here. Let's talk about this. And I realized that through that I was a big people pleaser. I was raised in a military family, and we moved up to Missouri, let's see, when I was in 8th grade, and that was our 8th move. So quite a lot of moving in my childhood. And so, a constant cycle of making friends and leaving friends and awkward lunchrooms, where do I sit? Where do I belong? Where do I fit in? And so I think I got, like, it built good skills in me. I'm really good at making friends now, and communicating with people. But I think the hard part, I guess, maybe to finish that thought real quick, is that I could very easily assimilate into whatever the current, culture was. And I just jumped right in and fit right in, and I could find a way to fit in everywhere. And when all of my thought processes started changing, that was just incredibly hard for me to articulate because I didn't know how to have a different opinion than other people without it being like a big thing, you know. I was tied to so many people through the church. I was tied to people through, similar thought processes on politics. And now, here I am like, that stuff's not for me anymore. And I really struggled with knowing who would accept me just as I was. And so I even like preemptively struck and just kept my distance from people that I didn't want to. I felt like maybe I was going to have to explain myself to, and I just didn't even know how to articulate any of this yet. Because this is obviously it's a lot, right?
Oh yeah.
It's not like a text message or, hey, what's going on? I don't even know, man. I gotta figure this out.
Sure.
So yeah, so that's kind of what that was like. And really, so I guess if you want, like I fast forwarded to, I wrote all these songs about these deep feelings that I had. It kind of took a year where I was able to not work and just work on my own mental health and physical health. And I knew just that I needed to do that. And in that process, I wrote an album's worth of songs, and I decided to kind of secretly record it. And just last year, I turned 40 in September, and I just dropped it on my birthday and said, hey, I did this thing. And it was
Nice.
terrifying because I thought, here it goes. Everybody's going to reject me now.
Sure.
And that was interesting too, because I did get a lot of support, a lot more support than I thought that I would.
Excellent.
And yeah, it was good. There are people that have been vocal supporters in the past, because I did put out a Christian music EP about like 10 years ago. And so there were, a lot of supporters then. So there was a lot of people that I felt their silence, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I felt,
Once they started listening, they were kind of like,
yeah, yeah. And yeah, even recently, well, I guess a few months ago now, it was pointed out to me that somebody that I used to go to church with used me and Taylor Swift as examples of people who no longer have a moral compass because we're not reading our Bibles.
oh my gosh.
First of all,
so
including
ridiculous.
me with Taylor Swift, I'm like,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you. But holy shit, like the fact that you can publicly say that about somebody who's literally like, the path that I'm on is to cause the least amount of harm to others in the world. That's the path that I'm on. I'm not about
right.
breaking, Christianity and breaking, down all the politics. Like, how do I be the best person that I can be while I'm on this planet?
Sure.
If
Yeah.
that means that I've lost my moral compass, then guilty.
It's crazy, right? Like
It is crazy.
it's projection as far as I'm concerned from the people that say stuff like that. It's just
my
like,
goodness.
That's bonkers.
Yeah. It actually made me like smile. My first
sure
reaction was a smile, and I felt validated that I had left the church community.
Sure, makes sense, because you recognize that was the behavior, right? And then they just reinforced the reason why you left, essentially, right? By doing the same dumb thing that they did before.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me why I do not want to be a part of that group of people.
No kidding.
And I don't mean to be singling out, like I'm not saying that all Christians behave this way.
Of course not. No.
Of course there's, wonderful people that are doing wonderful things, but I guess for me, Christianity now kind of has this weird kind of gross vibe where it's kind of attached itself to politics that cause harm. And that's what I don't want to be a part of anymore.
Yeah. Well, and it's been weaponized is what happened.
Yeah.
That's been taken to a place it doesn't belong, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't belong in government for specific reasons.
Yeah.
And this is one
Right.
of them, right? Because
Yes.
you shouldn't be legislating based
Yes.
on religion.
One day I saw an advertisement for the Freedom from Religion organization, and I just felt like it was like this, oh, like,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're they're they're
Yes.
from they're from they're from Madison, Wisconsin, which is about about a half hour from my house.
Oh my gosh, that's
So
crazy.
yeah, I'm aware of them. I'm familiar with them.
Oh,
Um,
well,
so
give them a
yeah,
high five the next time you're by the Robinson.
for sure, for sure. One thing I'll quick say about them that I thought was pretty hilarious is that so their headquarters, it's called Free Thought Hall. It's right off the Capitol Square here in Madison,
Mm.
and they put a big scarlet A up during Christmas time and light it up,
Oh my gosh,
and that's all they put up.
that's all they do.
It's all they do, and I was
That's awesome.
just makes me laugh when I see that.
Yeah.
All
Um,
right, so you've talked a little bit about your music, so this is a good segue because my next question was how does and did your music help you cope with the process?
yeah, that was everything. um, it, like I said, I was really struggling with articulating what the changes that were happening in me.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't wrap the words around the all the big deep thoughts that I was thinking, because it wasn't one thing, it was 100 things, and they were all complicated. um but my best friend one day, I had mentioned in passing that if I got a keyboard, which is not an instrument that I play guitar, um but I hadn't written anything in years. I mean, I don't even know. I know that it had been at least 2 years, but realistically, I feel like it was probably much longer than that. And so when, so I mentioned in passing, like, oh, maybe if I got a keyboard, that would be like new sounds, and maybe that would jog something new in me.
Okay.
And so the very next day, there was a knock on my door, and I see her car peeling out of the driveway, and on my front porch is a keyboard, a brand new keyboard, and
Wow.
on a napkin it said "Keep Creating."
Awesome.
So the people that know me the best knew that there was this component of who I am as a person that was really missing.
Wow.
And yeah, I have the best friends. Um,
Pretty
and
great.
I went and I set that thing up, and I started dinking around, and I think I came back to it after dinner, and I just sat down and I wrote an entire song, which is Submarine, by the way.
All right.
Um, and that night, bam, it was there. And every word in that song matters. That song was just about wanting to hide from the depth of the the heartache and the big heavy world issues we're having, because it was so much.
Yep.
2020 was so much.
It was so much for a ton of people. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
right. We all experienced it in different ways. And
Right. Well, and
so
you also added deconstructing to it, so I can't imagine what that was like.
yeah, well, it was a whole crisis.
Yeah, for sure.
you know
Yeah,
and yeah, so Submarine came out, and then like slowly but surely other songs started making their way out, and I was able to pick up a guitar, and here's another song. And kind of over time, over I guess about a year, I wrote a few more songs that made it to the album. But all these ones that made it to the album are that theme of going through such big life changes and trying to cope with it.
sure.
And so yeah, music was was everything. And also I had been starting to, my first song comes out. I'm terrified to put it out, right? Because it's going to challenge people's thoughts in my head. My brother all the time reassures me that nothing that I've written is controversial. But in my head, if I know that people um, sat down and listened to the lyrics, that they probably would not, love my perspectives on things. And like Submarine, one of the parts was hold on to what's left. I have faith. The word left was very intentional because at that time, Trump had just lost the election, but people were completely denying it.
Right.
And, at that point, it was like anybody but Donald Trump has to make it into the Oval Office,
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So, and it also felt like a lot of people like me were going, this is insanity. We're not tolerating this, especially if you are buying into the lies that were being put out there. Other politicians,
Yep.
and and they all felt like they had to, right? Because they all had to be on the same team, despite ethics.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. No moral compass.
Yeah, gosh, like I'll always admire Lynn Cheney, or wait, is it Lynn Cheney?
Liz Cheney.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Liz Cheney, for just being brave enough to step up against her party and say, this isn't logical, guys. This is not acceptable behavior for professionals, you know. So anyhow, where was I at?
Yeah, we were talking about how it helped you cope, and you said you had released Submarine.
Yeah, just putting that out there, and it also felt like this breath of like a reintroduction, like it or not, everybody, here's who I am now, you know, and it felt like I was getting to turn a leaf and be more authentically myself. And I was just ready to be that. I was ready to quit hiding behind my my fears of maybe people aren't going to like me anymore. Maybe people aren't going to want to be my friends anymore, you know? So, yeah, music was incredibly important for helping me articulate the things that I didn't know how to say, and for helping me to transform into more of the person that I want to be.
I've seen some posts from you recently on Instagram. You've been playing some shows. It looks like some places getting trying to get I guess get out there in the indie rock scene. Is that right?
Yeah.
So how's that been going?
Oh my gosh. This year blew me away. I joined a music marketing group last year, right before I dropped my album, to try and learn as much as I possibly could about the right way to release an album.
Okay.
And so that was wonderful. Combine that with like a little bit of, a lot of knowledge, and New Year's resolutions. I'm a huge fan. New year, new me every year.
Sure.
I love setting a goal and going after it. And so this year, my goal was to grow my community and to get gigs in 3 places that I loved. Because first year, I had to write the songs. Second year, I had to record them. And it felt like a natural progression that it's time to get out, time like start gigging again, which I have not done outside of church. I haven't done with my own like original music in like almost 20 years.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, kind of a big step for me.
Sure.
But I mean, I can't even fathom. I could never have imagined how this summer was going to turn out when I kind of set my intentions out there in the beginning of January. I was just, I'm writing an email. I put out an email every Sunday just to kind of touch base with the community that, that I'm a part of now. So, looking ahead, I could have never fathomed how this summer was going to turn out. I have I set out for 3 cities. I got gigs in Denver, which I love. I have family out there, and I've been visiting Colorado every year my whole life, and I absolutely love it. And I hope that I end up there someday. And also, I had always wanted to go back to Taos, New Mexico, because it was really cool when we traveled through there, and I didn't feel like we got enough time in the area. So I was like, I'm going to try and get a gig in Taos. And then, let's see, I got a gig in Kansas City at an art walk, and a band sought me out through Bandcamp, and we booked a Topeka gig
Excellent.
together. Yep. And then I also felt comfortable again to book, which was kind of a big deal, to book a local gig in my hometown, which I was a little bit nervous about, but being on the road showed me like that I can do it. And
Sure.
I just had this conversation with a friend of mine who's also a musician, and she noted something I had never consciously thought about before, but like people may not like what you write your songs about, but they don't interrupt you to say it, they,
Sure.
and that's true. I mean, it's, people will listen. And I've learned through this whole process. I mean, people who I'm 100% certain have completely different political and spiritual views than I do have thrown money my way to support me, because
Wow.
yeah, that has made me really, step back and think too. Am I just as guilty of placing a judgment on them? And yes is the answer.
Sure.
um, and assuming people won't like me, and those kinds of fears have just been so loud in my head. And instead, what I found this summer was just way more support than I ever imagined. I've been picked up on a handful of Spotify playlists. I've been somebody, only the host. He's a music blogger, and he did a great write up about me and my music. I was also,
Excellent.
yeah, just featured in the July issue of Indifferential, an indie
Okay.
music magazine.
All right.
Um, and like I kind of lost count of how many radio stations now, because I want to say it's about 10 DJs have picked up and started spinning my music on indie
Wow.
radio stations. And I say that I've lost count because some of them have syndicated shows, like multiple syndicated shows around
Okay.
the world, which, hello, that's freaking amazing.
Yeah, that is pretty great.
I'm just like reflecting and almost a little bit sad that I have to switch my focus now back to school.
Hmm.
I do love the school that I'm a part of, but I had no idea that I would get so much momentum over the summer and have so many people that are connecting with with my lyrics. Um, there was one comment that will stick with me forever, and it was somebody who is trans, and they said, your music is really important to me.
Wow. Awesome.
Dude, that's it right there. Like, I don't know. I want to create stuff that makes people feel less alone. And I want to create songs that have a message of compassion and empathy. And I want people to hear that, not just shut it down. It's really easy to shut down,
Sure.
comments, but somehow when we put it into art, it causes people to think, more,
Sure.
I think, and ponder and wonder about. And isn't I mean, I guess that's one reason that we create art, right?
Right. For sure. Yeah. Yep. Excellent. So
Yeah.
you've mentioned it a couple of times in passing here tonight. How has your mental health improved since you went through this process? And I don't know that you necessarily ever end the process. Maybe at some point it's something that maybe sticks with you forever, but you're probably near the end of it at least, right?
I don't know. Every day is something new, but no,
Sure.
you know, yeah, I don't know. Like you said, I don't know if there is an endpoint or not. Like I said earlier, I don't know that there's like a label that I wouldn't say that I'm an atheist, but like very much agnostic, and theism seems like the most logical choice. But I still have experiences that feel a little unexplainable and a little too specific, that make me wonder if there is God, or forces in the universe that connect us all, so there's some level of spirituality that I think, that I wonder, if it does exist or not.
Sure.
So I guess on the mental health note, I want to point out, like, when you lose God, lose church, you also lose a coping mechanism.
Sure. That
And
makes sense.
so, yeah, right. When you're a Christian and something bad happens, you believe that it can get better through prayer and asking God for it to get better, or you believe that there must be a purpose for this pain that you're experiencing,
Sure.
and you can just sit there and be okay with that. And I guess, darn me and my inquisitive mind, that's just not good enough anymore. And so I feel like there's, like a negative angle in that way of, well, maybe you can call it a negative and a positive, because I feel like now when things happen, I just have to deal with life as it comes at me. I, I can't, I don't believe that I can make it better, or change the circumstances. I just have to deal with it. So maybe that's like a for better or worse kind of a thing. Um, and I mentioned therapy and songwriting and working out. Those were all like really important things to maintaining my mental health through that time period. And, now, um, kind of on the two front, I feel like very at peace with the unknown. I feel okay with not having a label and not knowing you know, what is out there or isn't out there. And I feel, maybe perhaps I feel the most comforted knowing that if God is real, nobody will understand my brain and my heart and my thoughts more than him, if he's the way that everybody, the way that I learned about him in church. So that kind of gives me a peace that, like, it's okay that I struggle with believing that he's there, because he knows what I've seen. And yeah, you work in advocacy long enough, and I mean, I was just in there for 7 years, and you see and hear a lot of horrific tragedies, and it's just really hard to wrap your head around an all-knowing, all powerful, all-loving God who allows those things to occur. And then there's this other part of me that I definitely feel like more aware and more educated about how my actions affect others. And in that way, I feel, good about myself. But I do consider myself a lifelong learner. The word of the year for me, one of the English teachers that I worked alongside this past year introduced the thought of a growth mindset, and I just love that. I I if I learn more facts that point me in a different direction from how I believed before, I'm willing to acknowledge that and explore that, and change my mind about things. And I'm really proud of myself for that.
Yeah, that's great. That's like you said, that's part of growth, right?
Yeah.
You believe one thing for whatever reason. You find evidence that says, hey, that maybe that's not true, and you have to almost intentionally ignore it to not have it change your perspective, right?
Yeah.
So that's good. No, that's very good, because everyone should be that way, right? Like that's the heart of science, right? Like we people try and figure out what's going on, and they figure something out, and if 20 years later they find out something else that changes it, then that changes it, right?
Yeah.
It's not that
Yeah.
it's not that they were lying to you for 20 years, right?
Right.
It's that they found out, so they have new evidence that says it wasn't the way the majority of the people thought, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, it's a good thing. Education is good, and you don't have to go to school. You don't have to read books all the time. You just need to experience things, right, and let it help you change who you are, right?
Yeah. And sources matter.
100% sources
I'll
matter.
throw that in there.
Yeah, 100% for sure. On that note, it's hard. It's harder. It's increasingly harder to make sure you're picking out good sources, though, right? I mean, sometimes it's obvious, but
Right.
other times it's like you really need to have just everything you read. You need to give a critical eye to now,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's hard. It's a learned skill over time, right?
Right. Yeah.
So do you have any advice for anyone in a similar situation that you were and are in, or anything else you'd like to say about what you went through?
I think it's really important for anybody who is on this path to understand and know without a doubt that they are not alone in this. Um, Even if they feel like they are alone because of the people who are around them who believe differently or think differently, there are so many of us, thousands, dare I say, hundreds of thousands of people who are out there questioning it all as well, who feel like the world is crumbling around them. And I just want them to know that they're not alone. They're not crazy. There is crazy shit happening in this world right now,
100% there
you
is.
know, and um man, and you know, at least for me, and this is what I see as a commonality amongst most deconstructors. They're deconstructing because they're very empathetic, because they're very compassionate people who just want to do right by the people, you know, in their communities and in the world, and that is a good thing. And there are people that will accept you for who you are, no matter what. There are people who will accept you for who you are.
Excellent. That's great. That's great. So can you tell us, Emily, where anyone listening now, where they can find your music and find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm essentially on all of the socials now. Facebook, Instagram are kind of where I hang out the most, if you will. YouTube, Twitter, I guess Threads. It's like, oh, one
Yeah,
more platform to
like
figure
like
out.
we all need one more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, all of my music is on YouTube, and it's like streaming anywhere that you stream music now. So my artist name is Sundays with Emily.
Okay.
Um, just quick backstory on that. Because I was so involved in worship music and leading worship music for over a decade, which is, other than my husband, the longest I've been committed to anything in my life. I Sundays felt weird because I always like had this sense of obligation that I should be doing something, for church or whatnot. And so then when I didn't have that, I felt like I had this little hole to fill. So I
Okay.
started my Sundays with Emily Instagram account thinking, you know what? I'm just going to go live and play something on Sundays, and I can make it be whatever I want it to be. And so that's kind of how that came about. So yeah, Sundays with Emily, on all of those platforms. And if people want to connect with me more, then I would highly encourage them to and I post this on all of my social medias, there's a link to sign up for my weekly email.
Okay.
And that's just a place where I feel like it's a little bit more appropriate. You're not going to change people's minds just by posting a meme, you know?
Right. Yeah.
I kind of feel like, hey, let's talk about this more in depth. And I can do that through an email. And I've been really like humbled by the number of people that respond back and share their stories. And and it's kind of like its own Me Too movement, not to take away from the feminist Me Too movement, but it is this own movement of a sorts where people are saying, hey, this is not okay, and we don't want to be a part of this. We want to do better. And so just kind of researching Sundays with Emily on any of the platforms that people are engaging on.
Gotcha. Excellent. So the website is sundayswithemilymusic.com for the listeners out there. You should be able to get to her Instagram account, Twitter account from there for sure. And I'll have that information in the show notes, the Instagram handle, Twitter handle. All that will be in the show notes for anybody listening. So Emily, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It was really great to talk to you. Had a good time, and it was something, a learning experience for me for sure, because I've been peripherally aware of these things of this deconstruction process, but hadn't talked to anybody specifically. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Craig, for this opportunity to just share my heart and my voice on it. I know for a fact that deconstruction is kind of being demonized by Christian communities, and it's often demonized from a very misunderstood perspective, and most people are just trying to figure out how to be the best humans that they can be, and that's a good thing.
For sure.
That does it for the show. Don't forget to rate and review on whichever platform you use to listen. Special thanks to Nick Josephs for the use of the theme song. You can find Nick on Spotify and on the web at nickjosephs.com. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe on patreon.com/voicesfromtheleft or donate on buymeacoffee.com/voicesfromtheleft. All the links will be in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and solidarity.